Snow swirled through the parking lot so fiercely that even the glowing Christmas lights outside the restaurant looked blurred. Inside, people laughed, glasses clinked together, children pointed excitedly at a towering Christmas tree, and soft carols floated through the warm dining room. But at table 17, no one was smiling. Daniel Harper stared at the untouched cup of coffee in front of him as his blind date pushed back her chair. I'm sorry, the woman said quietly, avoiding his eyes. You're a wonderful man, really, but this is too much. Daniel didn't answer. She looked toward the little girl sitting beside him. The child had been coloring snowflakes on the back of a paper menu, completely unaware that her tiny world was about to crack again. I just can't become someone's mother overnight, the woman whispered. I thought you'd come alone. Daniel closed his eyes for a second. I understand. She picked up her purse. Merry Christmas, and she walked away. Daniel watched her disappear through the crowded restaurant without trying to stop her. It wasn't the rejection that hurt anymore. He had grown used to that. It was watching hope leave his daughter's eyes. Again, 8-year-old Lily slowly looked up from her drawing. Daddy, he forced a smile that fooled no one. It's okay, sweetheart. But it wasn't okay. This had been the 4th blind date in 11 months, the 4th woman who had smiled politely. Until she realized dating, Daniel also meant loving a little girl who still cried herself to sleep some nights because she missed her mother. Lily looked toward the restaurant door where the woman had disappeared. Then she quietly folded her drawing in half. I'm sorry, she whispered. Daniel's heart stopped. For what? She looked down at the table. They always leave because of me. Those 7 words shattered something inside him. Before he could answer, a tiny tear slipped onto Lily's paper snowflake. Daniel reached across the table and gently held her hand. No, baby. But, no, his voice broke. They leave because they don't understand what they're walking away from. Lily tried to smile. It looked painfully like her mother's smile, and that almost destroyed him. 3 years earlier, Christmas had meant something completely different. Their small house had always smelled of cinnamon cookies. Emily filled every room with music before sunrise. She insisted that decorating the tree was a serious family tradition, even if the ornaments ended up hanging in completely ridiculous places because Lily was still too small to reach. Daniel used to laugh every December because Emily somehow convinced both of them to wear matching Christmas sweaters that looked embarrassingly cheerful. Back then, life had felt ordinary, and ordinary had been perfect, until one cold January morning. Emily kissed Lily goodbye before driving to work. She never came home. A truck had slid across an icy highway. The doctors did everything they could. Daniel still remembered standing beside a hospital bed, holding Emily's hand as machines slowly became silent. She had smiled weakly. Promise me something. He couldn't even speak. She squeezed his fingers. Don't let Lily grow up believing love disappears. Those became the last complete words she ever spoke. For months afterward, Daniel barely remembered eating. Neighbors left casseroles outside the front door. Church volunteers shoveled snow without asking. People offered help. But grief had a strange way of making kindness feel distant. Every morning he packed Lily's lunch. Every evening he pretended everything would somehow be okay. After Lily fell asleep, he often sat alone beside the Christmas ornaments Emily had packed away before her final winter. He never opened the box, not once, because opening it meant accepting she wasn't coming back. Daniel worked as a high school history teacher. It wasn't glamorous. It certainly didn't make him rich. But every student knew one thing. Mr. Harper never gave up on anyone. He stayed late tutoring struggling teenagers. He quietly bought notebooks for students whose parents couldn't afford supplies. Sometimes he even paid cafeteria bills without telling anyone. Ironically, the man who spent every day helping other people's children secretly wondered if he was failing his own. Lily rarely complained. She tied her own shoes, packed her backpack, even reminded Daniel when he forgot to eat breakfast. No 8-year-old should have learned to carry sadness so gracefully. One evening, Daniel found her sitting on the staircase holding an old family photograph. Daddy? Yeah, If Mommy can see us, his throat tightened. Is she lonely because she's by herself? Daniel sat beside her. No, sweetheart. How do you know? He looked toward the stars outside the window. Because everyone who loves us never really leaves us. Lily nodded thoughtfully, then asked something he wasn't prepared for. Then why does everyone else leave? Daniel had no answer. Friends eventually convinced him to try dating again, not because Emily could ever be replaced. She couldn't, but because loneliness had become another person living inside the house. Every date followed almost the same pattern. The conversation started well. People laughed. They shared stories. Then Lily entered the conversation, or sometimes Lily actually arrived, and everything changed. Some women admitted they weren't ready. Others slowly stopped replying to messages afterward. One even said, "You deserve someone stronger than me." Daniel never blamed them. Being a parent wasn't a small decision. Still, every goodbye quietly chipped away at whatever confidence remained, until finally, Christmas Eve arrived. A coworker insisted she knew the perfect woman. Her name is Rachel. She's kind. She loves Christmas. And she works with children. Against his better judgment, Daniel agreed. Lily begged to come. Please, I'll be extra quiet. I just want to eat Christmas pancakes. He almost said no, but the babysitter canceled because of the snowstorm, so father and daughter walked into the restaurant together. Daniel secretly prayed, maybe this Christmas, Hope would finally come back home. Rachel arrived exactly on time. She wore a deep green winter coat dusted with snow, her cheeks pink from the freezing wind, and she carried herself with the calm confidence of someone who genuinely enjoyed making people feel comfortable. When she reached the table, her smile was warm. "You must be Daniel." Daniel stood politely. "And you must be Rachel." Before either of them could continue, Lily jumped down from her chair. "Hi, I'm Lily." Rachel laughed softly. "So you're Lily. I've heard you're very good at drawing." Lily proudly held up her paper snowflake. "I made this." Rachel bent down to admire it. "It's beautiful." For the first time that evening, Daniel relaxed. Maybe, just maybe, this night would be different. The waitress brought hot chocolate for Lily and coffee for the adults. They talked about books, about teaching, about Christmas traditions. Rachel told funny stories about the elementary school where she worked as a reading specialist. Daniel found himself laughing more than he had in months. Lily even joined the conversation, telling Rachel how her dad always burned Christmas cookies because he forgot to set a timer. Rachel laughed so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. Daniel pretended to be offended. "I've only burned them twice." "5 times," Lily corrected. Rachel smiled. "I believe Lily." For nearly 40 minutes, everything felt normal. It almost scared Daniel, because happiness had become something he no longer trusted. Then Rachel noticed the empty chair beside Lily. She looked around. "Is someone else joining us?" Daniel hesitated. "No." Rachel looked confused. "Oh, I thought." She glanced at Lily, then back at Daniel. "You brought your daughter." Daniel nodded. "I didn't have anyone to watch her tonight." Rachel stayed silent for several seconds. Her smile slowly faded. She looked down at her coffee. "I'm really sorry." Daniel felt that familiar sinking feeling before she even spoke again. "I wasn't expecting this." "I know. I thought tonight was just a blind date." "Yes," she sighed quietly. "I work with children every day. But becoming part of someone's family," her voice almost disappeared. "That's different." Daniel forced another smile. "I understand." Rachel reached across the table and gently squeezed Lily's shoulder. "It isn't your fault." Then she stood. "I truly hope you both find exactly what you're looking for." She walked away, not cruelly, not dramatically, simply gone. Daniel watched the restaurant door close behind her. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, his daughter quietly blamed herself. Those heartbreaking words, "They always leave because of me," echoed over and over inside his mind. He wanted to fix everything, but grief had taught him one terrible truth. Sometimes love wasn't enough to protect someone from pain. The waitress approached carefully. "I'm so sorry." Daniel nodded politely. "We're okay." She didn't believe him. Neither did he. Just then, a little voice interrupted the silence. Daddy, Lily pointed toward the enormous Christmas tree standing near the fireplace. Can we put Mommy's ornament on another tree this year? Daniel frowned. What do you mean? Lily reached into her tiny backpack very carefully. She removed a small glass angel wrapped inside a soft scarf. Daniel froze. He hadn't seen that ornament since Emily died. Lily smiled sadly. I took it from the memory box. You opened it, she nodded. I wanted Mommy to celebrate Christmas too. Daniel couldn't even breathe. That ornament had belonged to Emily's grandmother. Every Christmas she placed it at the very top of their tree after Emily died. Daniel had hidden the entire box in the attic because looking at it hurt too much. Apparently, Lily had quietly climbed into the attic a week earlier, not because she wanted presents, because she missed her mother. Daniel pulled her into his arms. I'm sorry. For what? Lily asked. For forgetting that Christmas isn't about pretending someone never existed. Lily hugged him tighter. We can still love Mommy. Always. The little girl smiled through her tears. Then let's hang her angel somewhere. The restaurant manager happened to overhear the conversation. He walked over carrying a small ladder. Would you like to place it on our tree? Daniel blinked. Really? The older man smiled warmly. Every Christmas tree should carry a story. Lily's face lit up. Together they walked toward the giant tree standing in the middle of the restaurant. Families stopped talking. Children watched curiously. The manager carefully held the ladder while Daniel lifted Lily high enough to reach one empty branch near the top. With tiny, trembling fingers, she hung the delicate glass angel for one beautiful moment. The entire restaurant became silent. Someone softly clapped. Then another person. Soon almost everyone in the dining room applauded. Not because it was extraordinary, but because everyone understood. Some ornaments carry far more than glass. They carry love. Daniel climbed down and looked at Lily. She was smiling again, a real smile, one he hadn't seen in months. He silently thanked the manager. As they prepared to leave, Lily suddenly tugged on his sleeve. Daddy, yes. Can we give Mommy's Christmas away? Daniel looked confused. What do you mean? Lily glanced toward the restaurant window, outside. An elderly man was sitting alone on a snow-covered bench. His coat looked thin, his gloves didn't match, and even from inside they could see he was shivering. Lily whispered, he looks like he's spending Christmas all alone. Daniel looked outside. Something about the old man felt strangely familiar. He couldn't explain why, but for reasons he didn't yet understand. He knew their Christmas wasn't over. In fact, it was only beginning. Daniel looked through the frosted window again. The old man hadn't moved. Snow rested on his shoulders as if he had been sitting there for a long time. People walked past him carrying shopping bags and wrapped presents. Some glanced in his direction for a second before hurrying away into the warmth. No one stopped. Lily quietly slipped her tiny hand into Daniel's. Daddy? Mommy used to say no one should eat alone on Christmas. Daniel's chest tightened. Emily had said that every December. She believed holidays were meant to include people who had nowhere else to go. Daniel looked at the half-finished meals on their table. Without another word, he asked the waitress to pack everything. She smiled knowingly. I'll add some fresh bread. Daniel looked up. You don't have to. I know, she winked, but I want to. A few minutes later, they stepped into the freezing night. The cold air stung their faces. Daniel walked toward the bench. Excuse me, sir. The old man slowly looked up. His beard was covered with tiny flakes of snow. His tired blue eyes held both kindness and exhaustion. I'm sorry to bother you, Daniel said gently. Would you like something warm to eat? The old man looked at the food, then at Lily. Instead of grabbing the bag immediately, he smiled at the little girl. Only if your young lady agrees to share a few minutes of conversation with an old stranger. Lily grinned. I like talking. Daniel laughed for what felt like the first genuine time in months. My name's Daniel. I'm Walter. And this chatterbox is Lily. Walter tipped an imaginary hat. It's an honor. They sat together on the bench while snow continued falling around them. Walter opened the container carefully, almost as though he didn't want to waste a single crumb. This smells wonderful. Lily watched him. Were you waiting for someone? Walter paused before answering. My wife. Daniel looked surprised. She's coming? Walter smiled sadly. No, he pointed across the street. A small cemetery stood quietly beneath blankets of snow. I visit her every Christmas Eve. Lily followed his finger. Oh, Walter's eyes never left the cemetery gates. 48 Christmases together, he smiled. And now I still come to tell her about my year. Daniel felt a lump rise in his throat. What happened? Walter took a slow breath. Cancer. He said it so calmly that somehow it hurt even more. I still forget she's gone. Daniel understood that feeling all too well. Sometimes grief never disappeared. It simply learned to walk beside you. Walter noticed the sadness in Daniel's face. You've lost someone too. It wasn't a question. Daniel nodded. My wife. Walter looked at Lily. And her mother. For several seconds, none of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind shared by people who recognized pain without needing to explain it. Finally, Walter smiled gently. Christmas is strange. Why? It reminds us of everyone missing from the table. Lily looked down at the angel ornament she was still carrying in its little scarf. My mommy loved Christmas. Walter's eyes softened. I can tell. How? Because children who are deeply loved always carry a little piece of that love with them. Lily didn't answer. She simply leaned a little closer to Daniel. Walter noticed. So, why did you both look so sad before you came outside? Daniel hesitated. It was supposed to be a blind date. Walter raised an eyebrow. Ah, it didn't go very well. I'm guessing. Lily quietly whispered, she left because Daddy has me. Walter looked at her for a long moment, then he shook his head. No, sweetheart, but everyone leaves. Walter leaned forward. Can I tell you something my wife taught me? Lily nodded. The right people never see love as extra baggage. Daniel felt those words settle deep inside him. Walter continued. The wrong people look at responsibility and run. The right people look at responsibility. He smiled warmly. And stay. Lily thought about that. So maybe she wasn't the right one, Walter chuckled. I think your mother would agree. For the first time that evening, Lily laughed. It was only a tiny laugh, but to Daniel, it sounded like Christmas. Nearly an hour passed. They talked about everything. Favorite Christmas movies, snowball fights, old family recipes. Walter even admitted he secretly loved decorating cookies, even though he was terrible at it. Daniel couldn't remember the last time a stranger had made him feel so understood. Eventually, Walter checked his old wristwatch. I've kept you long enough. Daniel stood. No, you've given us more than you know. Walter smiled. Then promise me something. What? Don't stop believing people can surprise you. Daniel looked around the quiet street. I'm not very good at that anymore. Walter nodded. Neither was I. He reached into his worn coat pocket. Carefully, he removed a faded photograph. It showed a much younger Walter standing beside a smiling woman in front of a tiny bookstore. She surprised me every single day. He looked at the picture with gentle affection. Love usually arrives when you've already decided to stop looking. Daniel stared thoughtfully at the old photograph. Then he folded Walter into a warm hug. Merry Christmas. Walter hugged him back. Merry Christmas, son. As Daniel and Lily began walking toward their car, Lily suddenly stopped. She turned around. Walter was still sitting quietly on the bench, watching the snow. Daddy, what is it? She frowned. He's pretending he's okay. Daniel looked back. Somehow, she was right, and neither of them knew that before sunrise they would discover who Walter really was, and why meeting him that Christmas Eve would change all of their lives forever. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling. Even after he and Lily drove away, Walter's face stayed in his mind. There had been something unusual about the old man, not the worn coat, not the lonely bench. It was the way he listened, the way he chose every word carefully, as though he had spent a lifetime helping broken hearts find their way home. The next morning, Christmas Day arrived wrapped in silence. Snow covered the neighborhood like a white blanket. Lily was already awake when Daniel came downstairs. She sat beside the Christmas tree wearing oversized pajamas, gently holding Emily's glass angel. "Merry Christmas, Daddy." "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." They exchanged hugs instead of expensive presents. Money had been tight all year. Daniel had managed to buy Lily only 3 small gifts: a second-hand telescope, a mystery novel she had wanted for months, and a handmade bracelet with the words "Always Together." Lily loved every one of them as though they were treasures. Then she surprised Daniel. She handed him a tiny wrapped box. "I made this." Inside was a simple wooden picture frame she had painted herself at school. In the center was their newest family photo, just the two of them. Across the bottom, written in slightly crooked letters, were the words, "Our family is still full of love." Daniel couldn't hold back his tears. He hugged her tightly. "You've already given me the best Christmas I've ever had." Lily smiled. "I learned that from Mommy." After breakfast, someone knocked on the front door. Daniel wasn't expecting visitors. When he opened it, he found the restaurant manager standing outside with a neatly wrapped package. "Merry Christmas." Daniel looked surprised. "You didn't have to come all the way here." The manager smiled. "This isn't from me." He handed over the package. "It belongs to Walter." Daniel's eyebrows lifted. "Walter?" "He stopped by the restaurant early this morning. He asked me to deliver this personally." Daniel looked down at the small box. "Did he say anything else?" The manager nodded. "He said, 'Some gifts are only meant to be opened after Hope returns.'" Then he drove away. Daniel and Lily looked at each other carefully. They opened the package. Inside was an old leather journal. The cover showed years of wear. On the first page, written in elegant handwriting, were the words, "For whoever needs to believe again." Lily whispered, "It smells like old books." Daniel slowly turned the pages. It wasn't a diary. It was a collection of letters. Letters Walter had written to his wife every Christmas after she passed away. Some were only a few sentences. Others stretched across several pages. One letter read, "Today I met a little boy who lost his father. We built a snowman together. I think you would have liked him." Another said, "Grief doesn't become smaller. Our hearts simply become stronger." Daniel kept reading. Every page carried quiet wisdom, gentle hope. Small reminders that love never truly disappeared. Then something slipped from between the pages, a newspaper clipping. Daniel unfolded it. His eyes widened. The headline read, "Local retired judge donates entire SAVINGS to build children's reading centers." Below the headline was a much younger photograph. Walter. Daniel looked again. It was unmistakably him. Lily gasped. "That's him." Daniel quickly read the article. Years earlier, Judge Walter Bennett had quietly sold his home after retirement. Instead of enjoying a comfortable life, he had donated nearly everything to build libraries, literacy programs, and scholarships for children who couldn't afford books. He never allowed any building to carry his name. He refused interviews. The article ended with one sentence. "Judge Bennett believes kindness only counts when no one expects applause." Daniel stared at the page. The lonely man on the bench had once changed thousands of children's lives, yet he had spent Christmas Eve completely alone. Before Daniel could process everything, his phone rang. It was the restaurant manager. "Daniel," his voice sounded urgent. "Is everything okay? It's Walter." Daniel's heart skipped. "What happened?" "He collapsed this morning outside the cemetery." Daniel immediately grabbed his car keys. "Which hospital?" 20 minutes later, Daniel and Lily rushed through the emergency room doors. A nurse directed them toward a quiet waiting area. Walter's longtime family doctor recognized them immediately. "You were with him last night?" Daniel nodded. "We shared Christmas dinner." The doctor's expression softened. "You probably gave him the happiest Christmas Eve he'd had in years." Daniel looked toward Walter's hospital room. "Can we see him?" The doctor hesitated. "He's awake, but he's very weak." Lily squeezed Daniel's hand. "I want to tell him Merry Christmas." The doctor smiled gently. "I think he'd like that." Daniel slowly opened the hospital room door. Walter turned his head, despite the oxygen tube and tired face. He smiled the moment he saw Lily. "There she is, my Christmas friend." Lily ran carefully to his bedside without saying a word. She wrapped her little arms around him. Walter closed his eyes for just a moment. The loneliness that had followed him for years seemed to disappear. Neither Daniel nor Lily realized it yet. But before this Christmas day ended, a little girl's simple words were about to change not only Walter's future, but Daniel's as well. Walter gently squeezed Lily's tiny hand. "Merry Christmas, my little friend." His voice was weak, but his smile was exactly the same as it had been on the snowy bench the night before. Lily climbed carefully onto the chair beside his bed. She looked around the quiet hospital room. There were no flowers, no balloons, no Christmas cards. Just one worn winter coat hanging on a hook, one pair of old boots beneath the bed, and the leather journal resting on the bedside table. She frowned. "Where's your family?" The question hung quietly in the room. Walter looked toward the window where snow continued to fall. "My wife went to heaven a long time ago." Lily nodded softly. "I know," Walter smiled. "My son passed away almost 15 years ago." Daniel's eyes widened. "You had a son?" Walter nodded. "A firefighter. He died saving 2 children from a burning apartment building." Silence filled the room. "I've never been more proud," Walter whispered, "or more heartbroken." Daniel felt his throat tight. "And your grandchildren?" Walter looked down. There were never any. For the first time since they had met, Daniel understood. Walter hadn't simply been spending Christmas alone. He had been carrying decades of loss, yet somehow he still chose kindness, still chose hope, still chose to comfort strangers. Lily quietly climbed off her chair. She walked to the side of Walter's bed. For several seconds she simply looked at him. Then she asked the question no adult in the room expected. "Mr. Walter?" "Yes, sweetheart," she hesitated. "If Mommy is in heaven," Walter nodded, "and your wife is in heaven." "Yes, and your son is in heaven too." "That's right." Lily took a deep breath. Then, in the most innocent voice imaginable, she asked, "If you don't have a family anymore, would you like to be my grandpa?" The room became completely still. Daniel stopped breathing. The heart monitor continued its steady rhythm. Outside, snowflakes drifted silently past the hospital window. Walter stared at Lily. His lips trembled for several long seconds. He couldn't speak. Then tears slowly filled his eyes, not quiet tears, not hidden tears. The kind that came from a heart that had carried loneliness for far too many years. He covered his face with both hands. His voice broke. "I don't know what to say." Lily reached out and hugged him as gently as she could. "You don't have to say anything. You can just come to Christmas with us next year." Walter let out a small laugh through his tears. Daniel had never seen anything so heartbreakingly beautiful. He walked closer and placed a hand on Walter's shoulder. "You gave us hope yesterday." Daniel smiled. "Maybe this is our chance to return it." Walter looked from Daniel to Lily, then back again. "You really mean that?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Families aren't always connected by blood. Sometimes they're connected by the people who refuse to leave." Walter closed his eyes. Emily's last words echoed inside Daniel's heart. "Don't let Lily grow up believing love disappears." For the first time in 3 years, Daniel realized he had finally kept that promise. Walter remained in the hospital for several more days. Every afternoon after school, Daniel and Lily visited. Lily always carried something. One day it was homemade cookies. Another day it was a drawing. Another day she brought her favorite mystery novel. "You have to read this one, Grandpa Walter." Each time she said, "Grandpa Walter," Walter smiled a little wider. The nurses noticed. His doctor noticed. Even the physical therapist quietly joked, "I think this little girl is better medicine than anything I can prescribe." Walter laughed. "I believe you're right." A week later, Walter was finally discharged. Daniel drove him home. Instead of a large house, Walter lived in a small apartment overlooking a quiet park. Books covered nearly every wall: history, poetry, children's stories, biographies. Lily's eyes became enormous. "Grandpa, you have a whole library," Walter chuckled. "I've always believed books introduce us to people we'll never forget." Lily immediately pulled one from the shelf. "What about this one?" Walter smiled. That was my favorite when I was your age. Daniel watched them together. Something inside him quietly healed. For months, he had searched for someone to complete his family. He had gone on awkward blind dates, faced rejection, wondered if happiness had passed him by forever, but standing in that little apartment, suddenly understood something. The best things in life rarely arrive the way we planned. Sometimes, a failed blind date led to the family you never knew you were missing, and Daniel couldn't help smiling as laughter echoed through Walter's apartment for the first time in many, many years. Winter slowly gave way to spring. Then spring melted into summer, and somewhere along the way, Walter's apartment stopped feeling like the home of a lonely old man. It became a second home for Daniel and Lily. Every Friday after school, Lily would race up the stairs before Daniel could even unlock the apartment door. "Grandpa Walter, I brought another book." Walter always pretended to be surprised. "Another one? I thought you finished the last 3. "I did," she proudly held up a notebook. "I even wrote down all the new words you taught me." Walter laughed. "Well then, I suppose we'll need a bigger notebook." Daniel would stand quietly in the doorway, smiling as he watched them disappear into the living room, surrounded by shelves of books and years of wisdom. It amazed him how quickly 2 lonely hearts had found each other. Walter helped Lily with history projects. He taught her how to write thoughtful letters. He showed her how to repair old books instead of throwing them away. And every lesson ended with the same sentence: "People are far more valuable than possessions." Lily never forgot it. One afternoon, months later, Daniel received an unexpected phone call from Lily's school. His heart immediately raced. Parents usually feared calls from school, but when he arrived, the principal was smiling. "You need to see something." She led Daniel into the library. There, sitting on colorful reading mats, were nearly 30 children listening with complete attention. At the front of the room, Walter was reading a story. He changed his voice for every character. The children laughed. They leaned forward, they asked questions. Even the teachers seemed captivated. When the story ended, every child applauded. The principal smiled. "Mr. Bennett has been volunteering here twice a week." Daniel looked surprised. "He never told me." He said he didn't want praise. The principal laughed softly. "He only asked for one thing." "What?" "That every child who couldn't afford books should always be allowed to borrow as many as they wanted." Daniel felt his eyes fill. Walter hadn't changed. He still quietly chose kindness when nobody was watching. That evening, as they walked home together, Lily slipped her hand into Walter's. "Grandpa?" "Yes. Were you lonely before we met?" Walter smiled honestly. "Very. And now?" He looked at Daniel first, then at Lily. "Now I sometimes wish the apartment were quieter." Lily burst into laughter. "So you're happy?" Walter nodded. "Happier than I thought I could ever be again." As another Christmas approached, Daniel climbed into the attic for the first time since Emily's passing. This time, he didn't go alone. Lily followed close behind. Together they opened the old memory box, but something was different. The memories no longer felt like wounds, they felt like gifts. They carefully unwrapped every ornament Emily had collected through the years: tiny wooden stars, handmade angels, a little ceramic snowman with one missing eye. Lily giggled. "Mommy really liked funny decorations." Daniel smiled. "She said perfect trees were boring." When they reached the bottom of the box, Daniel found a folded envelope in Emily's handwriting. He frowned. "I've never seen this before." He carefully opened it. Inside was a short letter. It read, "If you're reading this one day, it means life became much harder than we ever imagined." Daniel's hands trembled. "Please don't spend your life searching for someone to replace me." A tear rolled down his cheek. "Instead, fill our home with people who choose to love each other. Family is built by kindness far more often than by blood." Daniel looked at Lily. Neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. Emily had somehow described exactly what had happened. On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after the failed blind date, the Harper house was full. The dining table was crowded with food. Neighbors stopped by with desserts. The restaurant manager who had helped them that snowy night came for dinner. Several teachers from Lily's school arrived with homemade pies, and sitting in the seat at the head of the table, wearing a bright red Christmas sweater Lily had insisted on buying for him, was Walter. He laughed louder than anyone else. He teased Daniel about burning the cookies. He proudly told everyone how Lily had beaten him 3 times in chess. Before dinner began, Lily stood on a chair and held up Emily's glass angel. She carefully placed it at the very top of the Christmas tree. Then she looked around the room. "Our family is bigger now." Walter quietly wiped away a tear. Daniel looked at the people gathered around his table. A year earlier, he had believed Christmas had ended the moment his blind date walked away. Now he understood the truth. That night had never been about losing someone. It had been about finding the people who were already walking toward him. He looked at Walter. "Thank you," Walter smiled. "For what?" "For reminding us that hope still exists." Walter shook his head. "No," he looked at Lily. "She reminded all of us." The room fell silent for a moment. Outside, snow began to fall once again. Inside, laughter, love, and warmth filled every corner of the house. Daniel glanced at Emily's angel shining softly at the top of the tree. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was missing someone. He felt surrounded by everyone who mattered. Sometimes the greatest Christmas miracle isn't meeting the person you expected. It's discovering the family you never knew was waiting for you. And sometimes, all it takes to change a lonely life forever is one little girl brave enough to ask, "Would you like to be my grandpa?" Because kindness has a remarkable way of finding the people who need it most. And the love we give away in our darkest moments often returns as the brightest light we will ever know. The end.